Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. They often say, money is the cruelest test of love. Faced with a suitcase full of cash that could change your entire life, how many people would be brave enough to say no? Today, we continue following Diem and Tuan on a journey filled with tears. No glitz, no glamour, just salty sweat and a fateful kiss under the moonlight. But brace yourselves because the truth revealed at the end of this video is going to wrench your heart. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe right now to send strength to Diem. And now, let's step into the story. Diem's hand hovered in midair, just millimeters away from that cold leather handle. Inside her head were images of a healthy Tuan, of hospital bills paid in full, of the fake peace that money could bring. Tu smirked. He believed he had won. He believed everything in this world had a price, and the price of poor love was always cheap. But the exact moment Diem's finger brushed the suitcase, a jolt of electricity ran down her spine. It wasn't relief. It was disgust. She recoiled as if she had touched a live coal. Diem stood tall, took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Tu with fiery intensity. You're right, Tu. Your money can buy the best medicine, the softest hospital bed. Diem said, her voice trembling but echoing through the massive room. But your money can't buy memories. If I take this money and disappear, the Tuan you save will just be a soulless body. He will live, but his heart will die because he won't know who he loved or who loved him. Tu's smile vanished. His brow furrowed. You're insane. You plan to use that cheap tattered love to cure brain damage. You're killing him. I'm not killing him. I will save him my way. Even if I have to sell my blood, break my back working, or beg on the streets, I will cure Tuan. But I will never sell out my place in his heart. With that, Diem turned and walked away, never once glancing back at the mountain of cash. Her heels clicked against the cold stone floor, firm and decisive. Tu screamed from behind, "Just wait and see, you'll come crawling back here begging me." The villa door slammed shut. Diem stepped out into the night, the cold wind slapping her face, tears streaming down. She had just rejected a chance to change her life, rejected the only life raft. She was truly crazy. But in that madness, she felt a strange sense of peace. Diem got back to the rental room as dawn was breaking. Tuan was still asleep, his sleeping face looking so peaceful, free from the painful grimaces. Diem sat down beside him, gently smoothing the messy hair on his forehead. "Honey," she whispered, "I'm sorry for letting you suffer. We don't have money, but we have each other. I don't believe our memories can be wiped clean that easily. The doctor says you've forgotten, but I believe your heart still remembers." That morning, instead of taking Tuan to the hospital, Diem decided to make a gamble. She took Tuan to the outskirts to a small garden plot they used to rent to grow vegetables to sell. It was the place that held their hardest but happiest days. The sun rose high, casting golden rays onto the lush green vegetable rows. The smell of damp earth, the pungent scent of tomato leaves, the chirping of sparrows. It all flooded the senses. "Tuan, do you remember you hoed the soil for this row of mustard greens, and I sowed the seeds?" Diem handed Tuan a small hoe, smiling encouragingly. Tuan took the hoe, his hands clumsy. He looked at the tool in his hand like it was alien. But when Diem started pulling up the young greens, a miracle happened. Tuan's body reacted automatically. His hands The hands of a laborer seemed to have a memory of their own. He started tilling the soil. His movements were stiff at first, but gradually became smooth. Sweat beaded on his forehead and fell to the ground. "Does it feel familiar?" Diem asked her, heart pounding in anticipation. Tuan stopped, wiped his sweat, his gaze drifting far off toward the riverbank. I feel it's very familiar. It seems I used to do this on rainy days." Diem joyfully grabbed his hand. "That's right. Do you remember anything else who sheltered you from the rain?" Tuan frowned, trying to rummage through the mess in his mind. "There was a girl. She was wearing a blue raincoat. She laughed very loudly." It's me, Tuan," Diem exclaimed, hope burning in her eyes. But Tuan's smile vanished. He shook his head, looking pained. I can't see her face clearly. Her face. It's blurry, like the rain washed it away." Not giving up, Diem finished harvesting the vegetables and loaded them onto their old bicycle. "Let's go to the market to sell these. You used to love sitting on the back while I pedaled to the market." The district market was loud and bustling. The sound of haggling knives chopping on blocks, the strong smell of food. This was the sound of life, a sound once very familiar to Tuan. Diem led Tuan past the usual stalls. She intentionally walked him past the sweet soup stall where he first confessed his love. "Look, Mrs. Ba's sweet soup stall." Diem pointed, her voice trembling. "You used to say, as long as you could eat sweet soup with me, you could endure any hardship." Tuan followed her finger. Suddenly he froze. The noise of the market was abruptly distorted in his ears. The laughter and chatter around him echoed back like piercing sounds from a deep tunnel. Screech. Crash. A sharp sound rang out in screech. Crash. A sharp noise pierced Tuan's skull. It wasn't a sound from the outside world, but an echo from his memory. Tires screeching, metal colliding, and a blood-curdling scream. Tuan clutched his head, dropping the bag of vegetables to the ground. "Ah!" He let out a cry of agony, collapsing right in the middle of the market. "Tuan, what's wrong?" Diem panicked, throwing the bicycle aside and rushing to catch him. The crowd gathered around, pointing and whispering in curiosity. Tuan gasped for air, his face drained of all color, sweat pouring off him like rain. He dug his fingers into his hair, as if trying to tear open his skull to drag out the thing screaming inside. "It hurts. It hurts so much. Diem, no. That girl?" Tuan stammered, tears flowing from both physical and mental pain. "What about her? Do you remember who she is?" Diem asked, through her tears, clinging to a fragile hope, even as her husband writhed in pain. She's crying." Tuan squeezed his eyes shut, his body shaking violently. "In my head, she's standing there, reaching out to me, but I can't touch her. It's so dark. Too dark. I don't know who she is. Why do I love her so much, but can't remember her name? Why?" Tuan screamed in despair. The conflict between the lingering intense emotions and his empty memories was tearing his mind apart. He loved a shadow. He remembered a feeling, but he couldn't put Diem's face on that shadow. Diem held Tuan tight, ignoring the pitying looks from strangers. She realized she was wrong, or maybe she had rushed things. She brought Tuan home and helped him into bed. The headache eventually subsided, leaving Tuan exhausted, sinking into a deep comatose-like sleep. Diem sat curled up in the corner of the room, looking at her husband pale and gaunt after the battle to retrieve his memories. For the first time since leaving Tu's villa, her confidence crumbled. She looked at her hands that had sworn to save him. But today, these very hands had dragged him to those places. Her stubbornness had triggered that extreme pain. What am I doing? Diem asked herself, tears rolling down her cheeks. I want him to remember for him, or because I can't stand the loneliness of being forgotten. I rejected the money that could have bought him painless treatment, only to force him to face these sharp shards of memory. Looking at Tuan frowning in his sleep, occasionally moaning softly, Diem's heart felt crushed. She loved him to the bone. Was her love a cure, or was it poison to him right now? Diem stood up, walked to the small altar, and lit a stick of incense. Dear God, I chose this thorny path. I accept the suffering, but please don't make him suffer any more pain. If the price for him remembering is this kind of torture, then I'd rather... Diem didn't dare finish the sentence. She was afraid her words would become reality. Would she rather he forget her forever, but live in peace, or force him to remember in agonizing pain? Suddenly in the quiet room, Tuan talked in his sleep, weak but clear. Don't go. Don't leave me. Diem rushed to the bed, grabbing his hand. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. Tuan's eyes remained closed, but a hot tear leaked from the corner of his eye. I don't remember who you are, but please, don't leave me alone in this darkness. That sentence was a beam of light piercing through Diem's despair. He didn't remember who she was, but his soul still needed her. He didn't need the wife from the past. He needed the person holding his hand in the present. Diem wiped her tears. Her gaze became more determined than ever yet softer. She wouldn't force him to remember anymore. She wouldn't drag him back to that painful past. If he forgot the past, she would rebuild from the beginning with him. She would make him fall in love with her again. Not because she was his wife, but because she was the only one willing to walk through the storm with him. But is life really that simple? Their savings were gone. Tuan's illness was a ticking time bomb. And out there, Tu was still watching, waiting for her to collapse to prove he was right. Tomorrow, what would Diem do to get money for his medicine without selling herself to the devil? The following days passed in the kind old woman's small house in the peaceful countryside. The old woman who had sheltered them when Diem brought Tuan here to hide from the past and financial pressure looked at them with the gentle eyes of a grandmother. But the peace of the scenery couldn't soothe the storm inside Tuan. Although his memory of himself was a blank sheet of paper, the instincts of a grown man were still there smoldering. Every night, when Diem thought he was fast asleep, Tuan was awake. He lay still in the darkness, listening to Diem's soft sighs. He peeked at her, sitting by the flickering oil lamp, meticulously counting every penny earned from hired labor, then secretly wiping tears as she looked at the debt book growing thicker by the day. Under that sickly yellow light, Tuan saw Diem's hands. Hands that in his fragmented memories felt like they used to be soft, were now calloused and full of scratches from thorns. She rested her head on the table in exhaustion, her thin shoulders shaking as she suppressed her sobs. In that moment, an invisible knife stabbed through Tuan's heart. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know if he used to be a king or a beggar. But he knew one thing for sure. He was a burden. This woman was draining her own life force to keep his hollow shell alive. Shame rose up, strangling his chest more painfully than any chronic headache. The next morning, as soon as Diem left for work, Tuan went to find the old woman. "Grandma." Tuan hesitated, his voice still struggling to arrange the words. I want to work. I don't want to sit around anymore." The old woman squinted at him with a pitying smile. "You're not fully recovered, child. What can you possibly do? If Diem finds out, she'll scold me to death. I can do it." Tuan's eyes were unusually steady, a strong light flashing in eyes that had been clouded by illness. "The grapefruit orchard behind the house. I saw they need pickers. Please ask for me. Don't tell Diem, please." The grapefruit orchard was in harvest season. The faint sweet scent of blossoms mixed with the pungent smell of fresh rind created an atmosphere that was both poetic and stifling from the heat of labor. Tuan began his work. For someone recovering from a traumatic brain injury, climbing or carrying heavy loads was torture. Every time he bent down to hoist a full basket onto his shoulder, Tuan felt his head buzz like thousands of bees were swarming inside. The veins in his temples throbbed violently. The scenery before him swayed and blurred. There were times he almost collapsed onto the damp earth, but every time he thought about giving up, Diem's image appeared. He remembered her anxious eyes, remembered her crooked smile trying to reassure him. "I have to do this. I have to be a man." Tuan bit his lip until it bled, using physical pain to drown out the headache. He carried basket after basket, his steps unsteady, but never stopping. Sweat soaked his worn-out shirt, salty drops running into the corners of his eyes and mouth. The orchard owner, initially skeptical of the bewildered guy, now looked at Tuan with respect. He saw in this amnesiac man an extraordinary will and incredible silent endurance. By late afternoon, holding the meager wages, the first money he had earned with his own labor since his rebirth, Tuan smiled. A naive but radiant smile. He carefully smoothed out each bill, tucking them into his breast pocket, closest to his heart. He would give it to Diem. He would tell her, "I am not useless." Sunset fell, dyeing the red dirt road leading to the old woman's house a deep purple. Diem was walking home looking dazed after a hard day's work that barely paid anything. She was worried, wondering if Tuan had eaten enough, if he had a headache. Suddenly, she saw a familiar figure walking toward her. It was Tuan. But Tuan looked very different today. His clothes were stained with mud, his hair matted with sweat, a few dried grapefruit leaves clinging to his shoulder. But his steps were steady, and his face bore a radiance she hadn't seen in a long time. "Tuan, where have you been?" Diem panicked, running over to dust off his shirt. "Why are you so dirty? Did you fall somewhere?" Tuan looked at her, his eyes twinkling with joy. He slowly pulled the smoothed-out small bills from his pocket and pressed them into Diem's hand. "Money, wages. I went picking grapefruits. Grandma asked for me." Diem was stunned. She looked at the sweat-soaked money, then up at her husband's gaunt but smiling face. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scold him for being silly, for not taking care of his health, but the words got stuck. Instead, tears welled up. Not from sadness, but from a mix of happiness and heartbreak. "You're so silly. Who asked you to go to work? What if you got a headache and fainted out there?" Diem cried, while affectionately scolding him. "I wanted to help you. I don't want you to suffer alone." Tuan spoke every word, slow but sincere, like a knife carving into stone. Diem couldn't hold it back anymore. She rushed to hug him right there on the empty road. The sour smell of sweat, mud, and grapefruit peel on him was to her, in that moment, the sweetest, safest scent in the world. Thank you. Thank you for trying. Diem didn't want to go home right away. She wanted to prolong this moment. She held Tuan's hand, leading him to sit on the grassy bank by the road where an old tree was shedding its leaves. A new moon began to emerge, illuminating their faces. Tuan, Diem called softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. Yeah. Tuan sat still, letting her lean, a familiar feeling creeping into his heart. Does this scenery look familiar to you? Diem asked quietly. Back then, every time you picked me up from work, we used to sit by the riverbank watching the moon rise like this. You used to tell me about the houses you designed, and I told you about difficult customers at the shop. Tuan listened in silence. He closed his eyes, trying to visualize Diem's story. It's all very blurry. I only feel a sense of peace. Diem lifted her head, looking deep into his eyes. His eyes, under the moonlight, sparkled, reflecting her image, yet lacking the depth of shared memories. It's okay, peace is good enough. Diem smiled, but a fierce desire rose within her. She wanted to wake him up. She wanted to try one more time, not with words, not with images, but with the most primal emotion of love. Diem turned to face Tuan. She raised both hands, cupping his gaunt cheeks. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes blazed with love. Tuan, look at me. Tuan looked at her, bewildered, but drawn into those dark eyes. You might forget my name, forget who we are. But I believe your heart hasn't forgotten this feeling. Saying that, Diem slowly leaned in. The moment her lips touched his, time seemed to freeze. It wasn't a passionate kiss of desire. It was a kiss of sacrifice, of suppressed longing, of all the pain and hope she had carried all this time. Diem kissed him slowly, truly deeply, deeply tasting the salt of tears lingering on their lips and the undying sweetness of their love. She poured her entire soul into that kiss, as if trying to transfer her very memories into him. Tuan froze. For a split second, he panicked. But then the warmth of Diem's lips, the familiar scent of her hair, the racing beat of her heart. It all crashed over him like a tsunami. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck Tuan's mind. The thick fog vanished. Zap! A sharp image flashed in an instant. Rain. A pouring rainy night. A soaked girl standing there crying. And he was rushing to her, hugging her tight, kissing her madly in the rain to chase away the fear. The feeling of that memory's kiss. And this present kiss. A perfect match. Tuan groaned, suddenly pushing Diem away. He clutched his head, falling backward onto the grass. Huyen, what's wrong? Diem cried out, her face draining of color. She feared the headache was torturing him again, but this time, Tuan didn't scream. He gasped for air, his chest heaving violently. Sweat poured off him. His eyes stared wide at the night sky, pupils dilating and constricting. Inside his head, the fragments were rearranging themselves. Laughter, crying, the sound of Tuan honey, echoing in chaos. He turned to look at Diem. His gaze wasn't vacant anymore. It bored into her, filled with confusion and fear, but also holding a vague recognition. He raised a trembling hand, touching his own lips. where the taste of Diem's kiss was still hot. Then he touched Diem's lips. "Rain!" Tuan rasped, his voice hoarse. "What did you say?" Diem held her breath, her heart ready to jump out. "I see. Rain." Tuan looked straight into Diem's eyes, and for the first time a tear rolled from the corner of his eye down to his temple. "I see. You're wearing a white dress. You're crying. And I promised." Tuan left the sentence, hanging a sharp pain making him wince. But he stubbornly kept his eyes open. He was terrified that if he blinked, the girl in the white dress in the rain would vanish. "What did you promise Tuan? You remember, don't you? What did you promise me?" Diem gripped his shoulders, shaking him, her tears falling like rain. Tuan looked at her, the internal struggle etched on his face. Half the memory had returned, but the other half was still shrouded in darkness. He remembered the promise, but he didn't remember why they had fallen into this tragedy. He grabbed Diem's hand, squeezing it so hard it hurt. "I promised I would never leave you alone. But Diem..." Tuan's voice suddenly trembled with terror. "Why, in that memory, do I see my hands covered in blood?" The wind hissed through the bamboo hedge. Insects buzzed in a chorus. Tuan's question hung in the air, turning the budding hope into a new horror. Whose blood? Why was there blood? Was the memory Tuan just found a memento of love or the beginning of a crime, a terrible secret he had sealed away to protect himself? That kiss opened the door to his memory. But behind that door, it wasn't just light. It seemed a demon was waiting. Will Diem be brave enough to face the bloody truth of his past with him? Or will this memory be the thing that separates them forever crueler than oblivion? Dear friends, a fateful kiss has changed everything. Tuan remembered, but what he recalled is a nightmare. What is the secret of the blood-stained hands? Does it have anything to do with Tu and the underground forces behind him? The story is entering its most dramatic phase with unimaginable twists. Subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on the notification bell to be the first to know the truth. In the next episode, the ghost of the past and the stain that can't be washed.
Em ngồi